When we started, it was probably 80-20, 80% being referrals from other attorneys and 20% organic from social networks or family members, stuff like that. And as we built the firm, as it should, it starts to change over. And where we've gotten is now it's about 80 organic, probably 20% referral. And a lot of that is return client doing a good job, like any business. If you treat your clients, if you're honest with them, they will refer folks. And so a lot of our stuff is former client referrals. So they refer family members, friends. A lot of our biggest cases have come in that way. The other stuff is I have made a point to, through social media, to continue to stay connected to my social networks.
Welcome to the Founding Partner Podcast. Join your host, Jonathan Hawkins, as we explore the fascinating stories of successful law firm founders. We'll uncover their beginnings, triumph over challenges, and practice growth. Whether you aspire to launch your own firm, have an entrepreneurial spirit, or are just curious about the legal business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Founding Partner Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Hawkins. Looking forward to today's guest. As a longtime friend of mine, this is a section mate from way back in the day at law school. Today's guest is Arman Deganian. He is a personal injury plaintiff's lawyer here in Atlanta. Arman, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your firm, where is it, what you do, how many people you've got, how many offices you got, et cetera.
Yeah, thanks for having me on here, man. Like you had mentioned, we've been friends since, I guess, fall of 2000. And I never thought I would be a personal injury attorney because of my experience in torts. I wasn't very good at it. But now I'm a personal injury attorney in Atlanta. I am a founding partner of Lintner Deganian. And my law partner is Steve Lintner. We practice almost exclusively personal injury here in Metro Atlanta. Our primary office is here off of Briarcliff, where I'm at now. And we have 8 attorneys, including myself, and about all in staff members and attorneys, we're hovering typically between 30 and 35. So I guess we're consider ourselves a medium-sized personal injury firm with offices in Savannah and Columbus as well.
Yeah, I thought you had some other offices. We'll get into that. So you mentioned torts back in law school. We were catching up a minute ago, but I remember we had, was one of the legendary, I guess, professors at Georgia, Perry Centel. And scary, I remember intimidating to get in there. He had, what did he say? It was like 3 rules, something like never come to class unprepared, never be late for class, and then like never miss class, something like that. You remember that?
Yeah. I just remember being petrified about being called in class. And number 2, being called in class and not knowing the content, the previous night's homework assignment, because it was so hard. All this of the horror we experienced was, I think, the first semester. The second semester, we caught on a little bit. But first semester, it was so hard to keep up. But I made a point. If I was going to miss getting to all my assignments the night before, it wasn't going to be fucking torts. I was going to read torts first every time because I was so scared.
I remember he would have those extra assignments that you had to go to the library to get, and he wouldn't tell you about them. You just had to know to check in there. Do you remember that?
Yes. God. I probably trauma bonded with everyone and blocked all that out because I haven't thought about it in so long.
The other, I remember it was the first week. He gives us those rules. We're all scared shitless. In that first week, it might have been the third day of class. And I remember we were sitting in there, and the way those classrooms were set up, they had the door in the front and the door in the back. And he's up at the front giving his lecture, and this girl walks in 5 minutes late from the front, not even from the back. And she starts walking across. I remember he stopped and he just started staring at her. She didn't even see him looking at her. And then she went and she sat down, and then he just went off on her. And I swear I never saw her again. I think she left.
I remember that happening. And just as you were telling me that story, I was thinking, did we ever see her again? I think you're right. I don't think she ever came back. I don't remember who it was, but I remember thinking, shit, I do not want to be that person.
As I look back on it, I feel, was that all a setup? Did he have some undergrad come in on purpose? It was all staged because he was a performance kind of guy. Was it staged?
It could have been. And he wasn't mean at heart. Looking back, I think he was trying to prepare us for the difficult line of work, especially if you were going to do torts, because it's personal injury, which is what I do. And I've been on both sides, and it is difficult. It's demanding and clients are demanding. Maybe I'd like to think that was set up, because if not, I feel terrible for that girl.
So you mentioned that you really had no intention of being a personal injury lawyer. What did you always know you were going to go to law school? Take me back then.
I didn't. And I think I actually spoke in a college class of one of our classmates from law school, Jahan El-Jarbaji. I don't know if you remember her.
Yeah.
We were all in the same section, and we talked about this in her class, because she teaches at Georgia College and she teaches a business class and ethics class, I think business ethics, and some legal undergrad classes. And we were talking about that, about how we ended up at law school. And for me specifically, it was like a default, because I was really I was a history major at Georgia. I loved it. And I had taken the GRE. I was planning to get my doctorate in history. And I had chatted with a couple of the doctorate candidates at Georgia, because I got to know some of them, and they were TAs. And one of them one day didn't really take me aside, but he just I think he saw that I was eager, and he just said, "Hey, listen, you can do it. I'm not discouraging you from it, but it's tough and you don't have any control over where you live. Once you get your doctorate, you can go teach in West Nebraska State, and you're not getting tenure, of course. So you might be there 1 year, and then you've got to relocate again wherever you can find a job." And I never thought about the practical aspect of it. So once that hit me, I was like, oh shit. I decided, well, what else could I do? I couldn't do med school, and my dad's a doctor. So my dad came into town, and this was probably right around my birthday. So it would have been end of October, beginning of November. And we went to the varsity, my dad and my brother and I, because my brother lived in Athens too. And I brought it up that I had the idea of going to grad school, and I was just going to feel it out, because I thought if he would help me financially, then maybe I'll still do it and just figure it out later. And he made it very clear that he wasn't paying for my postgraduate studies. And I had hoped for undergrad. And my dad is he's a pediatrician, but no one paid for his. So you can figure it out. And when I realized I got to take federal loans, I thought I should get federal loans in an area that I could possibly pay them back. And so I applied to law. I applied for the LSAT course that next day, and I started it about halfway through. So I got half an LSAT course to prep me for it, which I took in December of that 1999.
That's hilarious. And your dad was okay with law school?
Yeah, he was fine with law school. He still didn't pay for it, but he was okay with me going. I felt him out for rent. He paid for my rent maybe the first month or two. And then I remember I lived on the east side, because I thought it would keep me away from downtown. And I literally had, looking back, before I got my federal loan, I probably had $100 in my checking account. And I wanted to law school was about to start. I just moved into this place by myself, because I was trying to isolate myself. And I went to Kroger and I bought a bottle of wine, and it was it's shit wine. I didn't know what I was buying. I just wanted some alcohol, and I was I didn't want to get a 6-pack. So I'll get some wine and drink it at my new place. And I didn't have a cork. So I got a knife to try to open it, and the cork broke off in the wine, and I drank it anyway. So I called my dad up. I was like, "Dad, could you at least pay for my rent for a month or two?" And he did do that. But I was destitute. The girls that lived there before had cats, and they were all these fleas.
Oh,
it was first semester was a trying time for me.
So you went to Georgia undergrad. I think you also, before Georgia, you went to maybe Utah or something, right? Or
I did my sophomore year in Utah. Georgia had, and they still do have, an exchange program where you can go to an out-of-state school, pay in-state tuition, and then come back and your credits all transfer.
Oh, that's cool, man. So you went out there to go skiing, or what? Just being outdoors?
Yeah, because my freshman year, I lived in Myers dorm in Athens, and all the exchange students lived in my dorm. So I got to know all of them, and they were telling me about the program. So I got connected to it in Athens, and you got 3 choices. And I picked Utah, Wyoming, and maybe Colorado, and by priority, and I got Utah. I just wanted to go west. I'd never really been out there.
That's cool. All right. So then you're like, all right, I'll go to law school. Did you only apply to Georgia? Or did you look at other schools?
I got a 156 on my LSAT, which was not super impressive, but I was very involved in campus. I worked on campus. I did a undergrad honors program. I traveled a good bit and did the exchange. I think on paper I looked better despite the 156. So I applied to 6 schools and I got into all of them, but Boston College, I got waitlisted there. And then I actually accepted at Utah. And then as it came closer to school starting, I hadn't said no to Georgia, But I called at the last minute. I panicked and I was like, same thing, out of state tuition. I started looking at it on paper. So I called Georgia about 2 weeks before classes were supposed to start. And I said, do you still have a spot for me? And thank God they did. So at the last minute, I had already paid my, whatever it was, our down payment to hold our place in Utah. And I lost that and then switched to Georgia. So I had to scramble to find an apartment. That's why I found that one on the east side. So I was like, if I'm going to stay in Athens, I can't live like an undergrad like I did before.
It's interesting. I've told this to a lot of people. They're like, how to pick a law school. This is something my dad told me. He was just like, pick the state you want to live in, and then go to, if you can get in, go to the big state school in that state. Because he's pick the state you want to live in, make sure you live there so you have in-state tuition. Then go to the big state school. So it's going to be way cheaper than going to a big private school. And then all your classmates are more likely than at the other schools are going to stick around close and in the state. And then you grow in your career together. And that's come to pass. I remember I paid for mine too, and I maxed out all the money they'd give me on those federal loans. And of course, I was wasting it going out downtown. And
beers then were about 50 cents. So we didn't spend that much money. But you were lucky that your dad had that knowledge, because I didn't. My dad wasn't a lawyer. I didn't really know any. And I was just like going by the U.S. World News rankings. And I was like looking at Georgia, Emory, Utah, Boston. They were all in that area. And I was applying based on that. And I was thinking, if I go to a top 20 school or top 25 school, getting a job will be a cinch no matter where I go. But what you said is so accurate. Like anyone that asks me today, that's what I tell them. I say, figure out where you want to work, because it's all about networks. And not like good old boy, like pat you on the back networks. It's just, if people are applying here and they went to Georgia for law school, I'm just going to have something in common with them. I'm going to be like, oh, when were you there? What year? Same professors, maybe know the same folks. But if they went to Harvard and they're applying here, I don't know anybody, not many people went to Harvard Law. So it's not going to make a difference for getting a job here. It might actually be a detractor, because I'm like, he's probably too smart. He or she is probably too smart to be here. They're going to get bored and they're going to want to go do something at a higher level. I've got a friend who's a kid who's on undergrad who wants to go to law school, and I'm meeting with him in a couple of weeks. And I think that's what he wants to talk to me about. That's exactly what I'm going to tell him, is figure out where you want to be. Hopefully it's in state, and pick the school that makes the most sense for you, or the biggest one that you can get in state in, and go there.
There's certain schools, if you want to be a U.S. Supreme Court clerk, there's probably a handful of schools you probably want to go to. And Georgia actually has had a few. You got your odds go up if you go to one of those other schools. So definitely I get going somewhere else. But for what I wanted to do and what you ended up doing, I think big state school is the way to go. All right. So after law school, you end up by accident, like a lot of us after that. What was your first job after that?
I worked for, which I think you did as well, I worked for a judge in Paulding County. I worked for a superior court judge. So I was back then, I think they called them law clerks, and now they're staff attorneys. But I worked for two different judges in that circuit. And Paulding at that time, this is 0304, was a new circuit. They had been connected to Tallapoosa, which was like Polk County and all that. So I was just in Dallas, Georgia. And I worked for two great judges, Judge Foster and Judge Beavers. And I think Judge Beavers is still on the bench, but they were excellent mentors. I still say to this day, it was the best job I ever had, because it was a non-competitive atmosphere where I could actually watch good lawyers and bad lawyers practice law. And the judge I was with the most, Judge Foster, would mentor me and say, that's a good example of the right way to do it. Or he would get so frustrated when attorneys wouldn't pick up the phone and call each other. When he had a motion to compel, I would go over the motions, and then I would sit with him and say, what do you think? Summarize it. And he was like, if they just pick the phone up, we wouldn't have to deal with this. So I learned a lot of great lessons about how to practically practice law through that 1 year I was there.
And so for people that are not from Georgia, that's like just outside of Atlanta. So it's close enough to where Atlanta lawyers, the big city lawyers, can go out there and practice, but it also has its own sort of vibrant local attorney circuit.
Yeah. And 20 years ago, I would, on our lunch breaks, like myself and the judges and the DA and the sheriff would have hot dogs in the break room. So it was like a Matlockish back then, because we were actually in the old courthouse too. It was beautiful old 150-year-old courthouse. And I got to know all the local attorneys. All the attorneys' offices were around the courthouse in the square. So it was great because there's not much of that left, I think, there. And it's in a new courthouse now, a big complex. So it was a rural atmosphere at the time. So I really got a lot of face time with folks instead of just having to put my head down at a desk and just working. And I think that was a big advantage for me because that's what I needed to see.
And you probably saw the home cooking. It's like I've been practicing some of these outskirt counties, and it's not that far. It's not far, but it feels far. And if you don't have a local counsel with you, get home cooked pretty bad. I bet you saw some of that.
I would get frustrated with Atlanta attorneys because I could see the difference because I would get the local guys would come in and want to chat me up because I was the gatekeeper for the judge. So I felt really important. They'd come sit in my office and like, hey, Arman, how are you doing? And I'm like, dang, these guys like me. At the same time, knowing that they were trying to access the judge through talking to me. But I would get Atlanta attorneys that were really abrasive, borderline disrespectful, presumptuous. They'd file motions and they'd be like, when is the motion? They'd call me talking to me like I'm an idiot. And there were plenty of times where if I was leaning one way or the other, I'd lean away from them because of the way they treated me. And that taught me a lot of lessons too, is be nice to the people who can potentially screw you. And that was a big thing I learned. And I've taught to our attorneys here is do not ever talk to anybody in the judge's office in a disrespectful way. Like treat them as if you're talking to a judge. Same thing with dealing with anyone outside that could potentially influence any aspect of your case because you don't know what goes on behind the scenes. And if somebody was a jerk to us, we'd go back in the judge's chambers. I'd be like, this guy. And he'd be like, no. I'm like, the guy's an asshole. Yeah. And I would remember it. So I learned a lot of practical lessons there.
That is so key. It reminds me of a story. So my getting home cooked story. I was telling this to somebody the other day. It was in North Georgia, up in Jasper, maybe. I don't know. But I had filed a motion for summary judgment. They had no defense to it. It was just dead rights. There were no issues at all. And we show up for the hearing. There's a local attorney on the other side. And in the case, we had produced a big, maybe 5 or 6 reams of paper, and he had printed them all out. And he walks in there, his defense to the motion, he walks up and just puts that big stack down on the table, says, Your Honor, there's a lot of documents here. There has to be a question of fact in here somewhere. And of course, we lost. Oh, man.
Yeah, I guess so. Denied. And I can guarantee you what went on with the judge that they saw that and they were like, what is all this shit? And they're like, this Atlanta attorney, they expect me to go through all this stuff. I'm not going to decide this. I'll kick it.
All right. So after your clerkship, did you go to a defense firm after that?
I did. I then went to Mabry & McClellan, which I think just disbanded, but they were a pretty decent sized general liability defense firm. So I started doing insurance defense work. That was in 2004, and I was there from 2004 to 2007.
Yeah, and I think you went to another one, but I saw some post of yours a while back that, number one, I guess you like to travel a lot. We'll get into some of that too, but I think at one of these jobs, you had maybe taken a couple of European vacations pretty close together, and maybe that wasn't received too well.
Yeah, that was at Carlock Copeland. So that was people talk about quiet quitting these days. It was like a phenomenon after COVID where people would find a way to quit slowly. And I think I was doing that unconsciously. So I'd been there probably about close to 3 years. And I was just about my 6th year of doing insurance defense. Man, I was so burnt out. I hated it. And it wasn't anybody's fault. I just didn't like billing. I didn't like having to work in increments of 6 minutes. It just never fit for me. And I knew that from the first day I ever did it. I was doing it more to pay my loans. And I took a vacation to Turkey and Switzerland with my dad. It was like a family reunion. And then as soon as we got back, I planned another trip. I was probably 28, and I planned another trip to Italy. And I went on a hiking trip out there, like a 10-day trip. And I didn't tell anybody, but I put it on my calendar. I just put Arman and Italy. And I cleared my calendar. Nothing. And I was caught up on my hours. It was like August. And the first day I got there, I was in Milan, and one of the attorneys I worked with was like, where are you? Your boss is looking for you. And I was like, oh, I'm in Italy. And this was a BlackBerry, and I was texting on the BlackBerry. And I knew pretty quickly that the gig was probably up while I was out there.
All right. So you come back, and what was that like coming back? I'm sure you had a great time, but that plane flight back, that must have been a little apprehensive a little bit.
It was a little stressful. And I came back knowing there was a possibility that I was going to have to make a career change. But I'll tell you, I was almost hoping they would do it. That was how it was. Like I was coming back thinking, no, it's like, I got a decent thing. Like, I hope I don't have to deal with any shit on Monday when I get in. But the other part of me, I know, like subconsciously, was okay if it happened. And I did get back. I just didn't have the courage to quit myself because I was making decent money and it just seemed like an easy road. But I got back, and the partner I worked for, who I really liked, he called me Arman. He said, "Arman, we need to talk." And I was like, "All right." And he said, you violated the vacation policy, which in all honesty, we didn't have one. It wasn't published. It was just they could lean on it because I obviously had, because I think I had taken, like, you were supposed to get prior approval. I had been going on vacations for 3 years. I never asked for approval, but I got it, understood what they were doing. And the one positive that came out of it is he said to me, this is a tough line of work. This is a grind. If it doesn't work for you, you might be better off on the other side. Like on the plaintiff side, it's a little more, you've got more flexibility. It's a little less traditional in terms of structure. And that stuck with me. They gave me 30 days. So that was great. So I found another job within a week, which enabled me to try jury trials because I'd never tried one up to that point. But that's where the kind of sprinkles in my brain started going off, where I was like, maybe I don't have to do this. Maybe I don't have to be an insurance defense attorney the rest of my life. Nothing against folks that do it, but I just thought I was stuck. Like I didn't have a choice. And so I started to put a plan together at that point.
So you ended up leaving there, got another job. Wasn't there a pivot in there too? Didn't you like run a restaurant, bar or something at some point? When did that come into the timeline?
So that was right before I violated the vacation policies, when I had opened I didn't start it, but I had a friend who was opening a bar and he got me involved and I became like a silent partner. So that was going on at the same time. And I think part of me was thinking maybe I'll transition into that instead of practicing law for a while. And I did that for 3 or 4 years, but that was very difficult too. The bar and restaurant industry, for anyone who's done it, it's a very tight margins on everything. But the great thing is, I think trying that got it out of my system, where I was like, I don't have to go on these I was searching for something. And I thought, maybe it is within the practice of law, but maybe I can figure out what it is I want to do within it. And that's really started sending me on that path of being purposeful about what I was spending my life doing.
It's interesting you say that, because I remember, and I've talked to a lot of attorneys, that it seems like when you first get out, you actually start getting paid and it's exciting. You're learning a bunch of stuff. So 2 or 3 years, this is fun. Then all of a sudden it hits. I don't really like this. I feel like I went through that. A lot of people went through that, and you're like searching for something else. And that's when a lot of people move to another firm. Maybe if I'm at a different firm, it'll be better there. Or maybe if I go open a restaurant, it'll be better, or whatever. I remember thinking all sorts of things, real estate, whatever. Of course, this was on the lead up to before the
08.
Yeah, before 08. Yeah. I'm glad I didn't do that.
Yeah, me too. I thought about that too. I was like, I could flip houses. I can get a bunch of dumps in, Cabbagetown and Grant Park, and I'll just flip them in a year and I'll make $100,000. Thankfully, I never put that into play.
If only we had the capital, we just bought up a bunch of houses down there, we'd be doing okay now.
It was probably good that we were broke. I had all this disposable income, and I'm talking like $8,000 in my checking account. And I was like, I can do whatever the fuck I want.
Yeah. So you went to a place, you could then get a bunch of jury trials. How many trials did you end up doing?
I was at another firm, and they're no longer around either. And this was probably 2009 through 2011. So I spent 2 years, and my friend Tim Gardner, who I'm still close with, who's a PI attorney now too, has his own firm. He brought me on to the firm he was at, and he had a non-standard carrier as his client, all minimum limit policies, and he needed somebody to litigate it. He was managing it, but he needed someone to litigate it. So I came on as of counsel. So I worked out a different structure, which was great for me, where I didn't have to be in the office at any time. So I just billed by the hour, and I got paid for my work, and it never really got cut, which was great. And I could do it from home or I could do it from the office. But I was taking depositions almost every day, and I really got an opportunity to get in court. So I tried, in that first year, I probably tried 10 of them. Sometimes one back to back. I'd finish one, then I'd go from Athens, I'd go to Clayton, try one. And again, they were all minimum limits, but that was the great thing about it, is I didn't have a lot to lose. Like, I'd go in there as cases where they had a $10,000 offer and it's 25 policy. They were at $22,000. I'd go try it, and I never exposed the policy. So that was great, because I could just go in there. I never winged it, but I could go in there and be creative, and I knew I wasn't going to get walloped. So that took a lot of stress off my back. and I got a chance to develop my presence in court, which I think is what all attorneys need if you want to litigate. Because from the difference from my first trial to my fifth was like astronomical. The first trial, I'm mimicking everything I've ever seen. By the fifth, I'm like, that doesn't work for me. That I don't say ladies and gentlemen, I say y'all. I learned that after about 3, because every time I said ladies and gentlemen, I was like, who is that? That's not my voice. So it was that was the best thing that could have happened to me, is I really got in the trenches a little bit and realized that I'm competent at doing something in the law that I really like.
The openings, the closings, the crosses, all that. But picking a jury, you got to do that a bunch too, just to feel for people what a good question is, what a bad question is.
Yeah, how to get people talking. That's picking a jury is still probably my favorite part. That's the only part I really get excited for, because I do think, and it's not, I don't live under the illusion that I can influence anyone during that process, but it is fun to engage. And we do this every day, and you think jury's going to do this and do that, but you don't really know until you get them in front of you and you start asking questions about their life and their experiences. And I just enjoy hearing it. And I think it pays off for me, because I think that jurors can tell that I'm engaging genuinely with them, as opposed to taking notes and just asking canned questions. So that part has always been really rewarding for me. And that's, I think, what made me realize I can do the plaintiff side, because I was doing all that on the defense side, but I was already thinking, I like this, but I'd like it better over there on that side.
Okay, real quick. Thanks for listening. If you're getting any value out of this podcast, please take 2 seconds to hit the subscribe button and leave a 5-star review. It would really mean a lot to me. Now back to the show. So you're getting the jury experiences, the jury trials, and you're doing the defense work still. You had the seed, the thought of maybe switching. So at some point you did switch. So what was it that finally drove you, all right, now's the time? And then when you did it, did you start your own firm, or did you join an existing sort of plaintiff's firm?
So initially I went and I joined an existing firm, Roger Orlando's firm. And I had a couple of high school friends that worked at Roger's office. So that's how I came to take that opportunity, because one of them called me and she said, Roger's looking for a new associate attorney. Would you be interested in switching sides? And had I been at Carlock Copeland, I probably would not have done it, because I took a big salary cut. There were incentives to your production. So if you produced X amount of fees, not originated, produced, I could hit different tiers of income. So for me, I had cut my salary down. I didn't have a salary at the last defense firm I was at. So I was like, shit, this is what I'm already doing, but I'm getting guaranteed $60K, and then I can make whatever after that. So it was a perfect timing for me. And I joined there in 2011, and I did that for about 3.5 years, and then started my practice with Steve.
Okay, so you were there. What caused you to leave there to go start your own firm?
Nothing about the firm. I loved working with Roger. I got to a point where I was like, I can do it. The fear of taking a chance started to wear off. Taking a chance on yourself in terms of, can I generate the work? Can I go out and get it? Can I take the financial risk of not having guaranteed income? After 2-3 years, when I just got more confident, and I thought, I can do it. And you know what? And if I don't, at least I'll never look back. At the time I was 33 or 34. So I thought, I don't have much longer. If I'm 40, I don't know if I'll have a family or what. It's really difficult to do at that point, because you got to go to the dinners and the lunches and the breakfasts and all that stuff. So I said, fuck it, I'm going to take a shot at it. And luckily the timing was really good. And Roger was great about me leaving. Like it was on very good terms. And I even took some cases with me.
Let's talk about that, because I do a lot of law firm breakup type litigation, and that's a huge thing, especially at PI firms or contingency firms. Somebody leaves and tries to take a bunch of cases, and that's when the fights break out. So how did you manage that?
So I'd seen the attorney that left before, whose place I took, it was a contentious split, because I don't know the facts of it all, but so he took some cases with him, and it sounded like there may not have been an agreement. So there was some litigation that went on. So I saw it coming in, and I promised him that I wouldn't screw him over. I think I may have signed an employment contract, but I never signed anything like any sort of agreement not to take any cases. But I just told him, I said, listen, I promise you, if I ever make a move, I'll come to you first, and I'll obviously give you notice, like you should. And then we can sit down and look at cases, whatever. But I promise I'll never steal anything. So when it came time to do it, what I did was I made a list of all the cases that I thought, one, that I originated. So I was like, I'm obviously going to take my originating cases, no problem. And then I said, there are a number of clients, I think maybe it was 15 or 20, that I thought I'm pretty close to through working their cases, and they're already in this or post discovery. And I think they'll be upset if I tell them I'm leaving and I pass it on. But I said, that's your decision. I'm not going to contact them and tell them, obviously. So we just sat down and looked at him, and he said, okay, I'm cool. I don't think we disagreed over one of them. He was like, that's fine. And we just came up with a referral fee for it that I would send him. I think we did it 50-50. And I took those and settled all of them and sent him the fee. So that, I think, helped me start on a good foot, because I can't imagine going through what you probably see of the stress and anxiety of potential litigation and trying to start your firm, because that's stressful enough, like having to commit your time and energy to trying to make something float while you're having on this side of your life, having to, answer discovery and take fucking depots about your business practices. So I was really thankful we were able to do it that way.
I will say every situation is different. If you can work it out that like you did, that's always the best way. But sometimes you can't. If there's a lot of money on the table, you may have to fight about it. So I'm glad you're able to do that, because that would be a stressful beginning of your practice. Okay, so you've decided you're leaving. You let him know, and you decided to go out with a partner. You didn't go out on your own, right?
Yeah.
And so take me through that thought process versus on your own versus with somebody else.
So my law partner, Steve Lintner, we met each other at a GTL event, Georgia Trial Lawyers Association event. I wouldn't have categorized us as like close friends or anything. We just knew each other as lawyers in the same circle. So when I saw him at one of the conferences, and I think I mentioned I was looking into starting my own practice. And he said, if you seriously get there, call me and I'd be happy to share my books with you, and you can pick my brain about, because he had started his practice maybe 3-4 years before that. So I took him up on it, and I called him, and we went and met at a bar, and we talked for a couple hours about what his practice, and this is less, it was more theoretical, like what his practice, what goals he identified when he started his firm, and what his ethos were, and how he treated his clients, where he wanted to be in 10-15 years. And then I did the same. And there was a lot of symmetry in that sense. We didn't get into numbers or all that stuff, but just did we have some symmetry? Did we see us practicing law at the same type of law firm? And so we walked away from that. And then I did what I do with a lot of stuff in life. I went to Fox Brothers after that, and I sat at the bar, and I had a notepad. And on my notepad, I just wrote pros and cons. And I wrote down the pros of having a solo shop and the cons of having a solo shop. And the cons outweighed the pros when I considered the things that were important to me, like having flexibility, being able to travel, having a partner who's already started a firm, that's already dealt with kind of a lot of the headaches in starting a practice. So that appealed to me. And then obviously I thought he was a good person, and I wanted somebody that I felt like I could trust, because it's like a marriage. And after I got done at Fox Brothers, I was like, that's what I'll do. And so I think I called him the next day and said, let's take a shot at it.
And so you guys have been together for how long now?
So 2015 was a test year. So we had his own firm. And what we did is I came on as basically like I don't even remember how we structured it, but I was like with partners at a lot of firms where I was getting a percentage of like a kind of a revenue share, as opposed to us actually, being intertwined in the business. So I was like an employee, and then I was getting, X of the gross revenue. And we did that for 15. And then we met at the end of 15 and to decide if we wanted to make a true go of it and start our firm together. So in January 1st of 2016, that's when we actually started Lintner Deganian.
Okay, so you guys have made it work. How do you divide the labor or the roles in the firm? What do you do versus what Steve does?
So a lot of it has been probably what you hear from a lot of people. It's trial and error. Like we would say, I'll do this, you do that. And there's a lot of gray. And then we get upset with each other. It's like a marriage. Like, I thought you were going to take the trash out. And you didn't take the trash out, but I cooked tonight. You didn't clean. A lot of it we sorted out that way. But I think why we've been successful is when we had those first conversations, we figured out what our strengths and our weaknesses were. And my strengths were, I like talking to people. I like being the kind of outward face of the firm. I enjoy that. And I enjoyed litigating, and I had done it for a long time. Steve is great with people, but he didn't want to take on that role. He didn't want the burden of having to do the social media stuff, do all of the glad handing, because he's got to he was just about to have his daughter at that point. He was starting a family and he knew it would be stressful. So I was like, this is my bucket. And then he said his bucket would be operations and a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. And that worked really well for us. And then until we started growing, and then we had to it's every 2 years we had to sit down again, say, where should you be? Where should I be? Where is it overlapping? Where are we coming up short? And we'd really have a come to Jesus with each other once to twice a year. And that, I think, is what kept us from ever splitting up. Again, just like a marriage. Like there were times when we were really frustrated with each other, but we thankfully sat down, communicated, and said, here's where I can be better, and actually put it into play.
There's a really good lesson there, and that's the routine communication about what you're doing and what you expect, et cetera. A lot of firms I see, they don't talk at all. And it's like it just festers and the resentment, and it just gets worse and worse over time. Good job there. So another thing that's pretty cool about what you're doing, or what you've designed your practice to be like, is that now you split time, right? You spend some part of the year out in Utah and then the rest here in Atlanta. So first, tell me about that. And then how do you make it work? And how did you say, hey, Steve, I'm going to do this? Are you cool with it?
It goes back to what we just talked about, the communication part. Like I said, hey, I am looking at a house in Utah and, considering purchasing it, and it's not cheap. So if I do that, here's the idea I have. And the idea was that I would spend the winter out there, and I would do it from November-ish to February-ish. And so that we could ski and enjoy the reason that we wanted to buy out there. And I said, we sat down and said, what are the expectations out of me while I'm out there? And I will do X and X. I'll handle social media to make sure that I'm still visible. I'll be available 24/7 like I am in Atlanta, and accessible to the staff. And we did it that first year, which is the winter of 22 into early 23. And there was no drop off. There were some adjustments to, I'm not here obviously in person to go if a client needs to meet. I wasn't here to do that, but we would talk about it. There was like a time or two where he was frustrated, where I wasn't there to be a fill-in for him. And we'd talk about other people in the firm taking on that role while I was going to be out there. And I made it clear, and I was just honest. I made it clear, man, this is a non-negotiable for me. This is what I want to do. And Steve was great because he cared that was important to me. Just like if he came to me and said, Arman, I want to spend more time with my kids, I'm still going to continue to commit the same amount of time to the practice, but it's going to be in a different form, or I'll be in a different place. And I would respect that too. And I congratulate him for making that a priority. So honestly, I think that's how we made it work, is just talking to each other. If there's a fuck up, we talk about it. If there's something that's causing resentment, we try to talk about it before it festers. Because what you said is true, that there have been times where it has festered and you're just like, you want to kill each other. And if you don't talk it through, it's just going to blow up because you're going to say something personal. And I think we've done a good job of not attacking each other personally, because I think once you get into that realm, there's not a lot of going back.
Yeah, there were a lot of weird things with COVID, but I guess some of the good things that we got out of it were the ability to do some of these remote or more remote type style working. And maybe that helped set the stage maybe for you to do this. And look, if you were solo working from two places, I guess you could do it. It'd be a hell of a lot harder than having a partner and maybe a bunch of attorneys back in your normal office that can go to court and take depositions while you're skiing.
Yeah. And I'm an early riser, so I get up at 4 a.m. out there, which is 6 here. And I'll work from 4 to 11, 4 to 12, which is 2 here. But I'm getting in, and I'm super efficient when I work. So I get in a ton, and then I go ski, and then I'll have my phone's accessible. So if I get a referral or a client call, I'll just do it. I'll answer it on the ski lift, or I'll text on the ski lift. So it's not like I'm out there on vacation. I'd love if I just was out there on vacation, but that's not reality. So I make it work by being always super flexible about my availability.
And you're really good at marketing, particularly social media and some of your videos that you have out there. You got a good sense of humor, and you're just out there. Let's talk a little bit about your approach to marketing and how you get your cases. So I guess, first of all, there's all types of models for PI firms. You've got the advertisers, you've got the internet people, you've got the big ticket trial lawyers that get a small number of referrals and do those kind of cases. Where do you guys fall on the spectrum, and how do you normally get your cases?
So when we started, it was probably 80-20, 80% being referrals from other attorneys and 20% organic from social networks or family members, stuff like that. And as we built the firm, as it should, it starts to change over. And where we've gotten is now it's about 80 organic, probably 20% referral. And a lot of that is return client doing a good job, like any business. If you treat your clients, if you're honest with them, they will refer folks. And so a lot of our stuff is former client referrals. So they refer family members, friends. A lot of our biggest cases have come in that way. The other stuff is I have made a point to, through social media, to continue to stay connected to my social networks. Because a lot of my networks are, I grew up here. So a lot of my networks are high school friends and college friends. And I play in a lot of softball leagues. And I try to stay connected. I'm on the board of directors with Lifeline. I try to stay connected to people as much as I can, even if it's not physical. And then I add them to my social network. And the way I have developed who I am and how I send my message out there is it is non-traditional. It's more self-deprecation. And I share a lot about my life, but I think the most effective way to handle social media is through that, is just being yourself, just like picking a jury. If you act like someone else, they're going to see through it. So I'm like, shit, man, I'm not like a polished up lawyer. So why pretend? And I'm not going to pretend I'm like, picture me like walking into court or taking a deposition in a suit, because it's just not me. And I think that's been effective for me, because most of my friends aren't like that either. Like most of my clients aren't buttoned up. They don't want a lawyer that's going to be talking, that they're going to feel might be patronizing them or talking down to them. So it's worked for me. A lot of clients, I think, connect with me because they feel comfortable talking to me. And I think that's across boards. I think that's important.
Well, you've got a lot of good videos out there. One that I really like is I can't remember how you phrase it, but it's like, what's my name? Or how do you say my name? And,
pronounce my name. Yeah.
you've got it's a Iranian name, right? Or whatever it is. And so it's not like an American or a Southern name. And then you go around asking all these people, how do you say your name? It's really a clever video. And it's just a window into some of your sense of humor. The other one that I really like is the Arman pose photos.
Yeah.
So tell me, how did you come up with that one?
That is a pose I've done. It's like where I lay on the ground and hold my hands and my feet in the air behind me. My brother and I did it, and I made him take a picture of me in Mexico back in 2007. And I thought it was funny because it was a way to make fun of yourself. And that's how I interact with a lot of my friends. So I thought, shit, I'll just start doing it everywhere I go. So I started, and oftentimes it was my brother David who I'd take the photo. So whenever I'm somewhere iconic or, that you can recognize by, like I've done one in front of the Washington Monument or at the Coliseum in Rome, I'll say, let's do one here. And I'll lay down and take the photo. So I've probably got like 150 of them from throughout the world.
I love it. You're building your coffee table book.
Yeah. A lot of my friends tell me I should do it. I'm like, I don't know. You guys would actually want to look at that once you had it.
You could put that together and make it a big event, send it to your former clients. You could make a big thing out of that. That'd be really easy. Put a pin in that maybe one day.
We did actually, since you bring that up, and I just thought of it. I'm going to grab this. Instead of that, what we did, I'm on the board of directors at Lifeline Animal Project, and we made a calendar, and we made one last year, and then we made one this year. And it's basically myself, and my staff members dressing up. The theme was like glamour shots, like our parents all had. And it's with the adoptable pets of Lifeline. And so we made these and we send them out to our like referral partners and clients. We leave them here when clients sign out that they can take them with them. We don't charge anything. We just put on there a QR code where they can donate to Lifeline if they'd like to. So that's been a lot of fun for us.
All right. Number one, you got to send me one of those. I need one of those.
I will.
And so what is the Lifeline thing you keep mentioning? What is that? Tell me about that.
Yes. So my firm in 2021, we were thinking like we'd always wanted to partner with a nonprofit, but we didn't want to just go out and do it. So in 2019 or 20, before COVID, we do a quarterly event with our staff, and we decided to do a day of giving. So we volunteered at Lifeline. So Lifeline Animal Project is the shelter that manages the shelters for DeKalb and Fulton counties. And it's one of the biggest ones in the country. I mean, it's a lot of animals that they take in and care for in those two counties. And we did our volunteer day, and we loved working with them. And in 21, we thought, who could we partner with? And we thought, shit, we've already connected with them. Why don't we reach out and see if they're open to a collaboration. So we knew they need monetary help. So what we proposed was, for like every case we settle, we'll sponsor the adoption of a dog or cat. And we estimated our settlement totals are per the year. And so we just went ahead and signed up to do that. So we've done that every year since then. And getting involved in that, we'd go down to the shelter and make videos and meet a lot of the folks. So through that process, I got to know some of the folks on the board, and they asked if I was interested in joining the volunteer board of directors, and which I did. I started this year. And with that, I get an opportunity to be more involved in the fundraising and the inner workings of it. It's been very fulfilling for me because, as you probably know, like, doing this is a grind, running a law firm, and it's consuming because it's all from like day one, from the morning until night, because people call on your phone, and I'll never complain about it. But that has given me something to break up some of the, I guess I call it, monotony of practicing law. And it's been great to see that, because one day I think if I stop practicing law, that could be something I could fall back on, is the volunteerism.
That's cool. Number one, that you already know what your next stage will be. A lot of lawyers don't know what that'll be. So that's good to have that.
I'm ready for it.
The other thing I'll say, a lot of our friends and colleagues, we just work, and it's like a treadmill, and sometimes you're not even sure why, where you've actually done a pretty good job of saying, all right, I want to design my life for me. So like you spend half the year in Utah. You also, I know you took those 2 European trips way back when, but you still take a lot of trips, right?
Yeah, I do. I mean, the way I look at it is that sustains my ability to do this. A lot of people say, my friends are like, how do you do it? You don't work, you hardly ever work. But I see them burning out like in front of my eyes. And I can see that in myself, because that was happening to me too. So I just made a conscious decision where I'm like, I'm going to do the trips. I'll still be available when I do most of them. I signed up a client in Nairobi when I was out there this summer, and I called him on the phone, and it was like a case, and it was a friend of a friend, and I made time to pick the phone up. So I can still do those things, because technology post-COVID, you can do all that shit. So I'll still do that, but I just committed to doing that type of travel and getting those experiences before I'm 60. I'm 40. I'll be 47 this year, and I don't know how long I can do that stuff. Like, I don't know if I'm going to want to fly to South Africa when I'm 60. I don't know if I'm going to have the physical ability to do it. I've seen so many people in my dad's generation and my parents' generation wait until the last minute, and then they die, or they physically can't do it. So that's something to me that's more important than some sort of pressure to feel like you need to appear busy all the time. Because let's be honest, like a lot of our friends who are always working, they're not very efficient. They're in the office, but they're not working. They're not always working all the time. They're going to happy hour, like playing golf, and nothing wrong with that. They just look like they're working a lot.
Well, yeah, that's what's cool. So you've pretty much designed your life to be able to do these things. You work as much as you want to. As you're sitting here, what's your vision going forward? It sounds pretty good. Why change it? Is there anything different down the road in your mind?
No, what we try to do every year is, at the firm, we have a partners meeting every year at the end of the year, and we just reassess the direction of the firm, the size of the firm, our intake criteria, what kind of cases we want. So it's really a year-to-year thing that we evaluate based on data. Do we want to grow anymore? Do we want to be more selective about the cases we take and maybe restructure the kind of meat and potatoes that we do? So I don't necessarily know how the firm looks in 10 years. But I know for me personally, I don't see myself ever getting totally uninvolved, like out of the firm, out of the practice. But I do see at some point in my 50s scaling it back a little bit so that I can do bigger picture stuff here, but not be caught in a lot of the day-to-day stuff that ties you down. Because that's a challenge for Steve and I always, and a lot of firm owners, is how do I get out of all these calls and all these meetings and all these small things that suck up all my time, where I'm always got these big picture items, the direction of the firm, the managing the associates, that gets inevitably backburned. You feel like you're never catching up. You're never getting there because you're caught calling a client who might be upset or trying to follow leads or something like that. So that's the challenge for me, is to try to get out of the weeds and free myself up a little bit.
I'm with you, brother. It's the hardest part. You have these visions of the way you want it to be, and you know how to get there, and you know what needs to be done. But you go in one day, you're like, I'm going to do this today. And all of a sudden, boom, all these grenades just start landing in your desk, right? Yeah.
Always something coming in that changes the direction of your day. And it's a blessing too, because I'm not complaining that that my phone's active and that I'm getting clients calling me, because I love talking to them. But it's just so difficult I don't do the heavy lifting litigation anymore, but there's no way I could never sit down and draft a brief. There's no way. Like, my day would just not allow me. I can't just turn my phone off, because I've got to respond to prospects and manage prospects. That's the heart of the business, is responding to potential clients and closing deals and settling cases and assisting on that stuff. So if I sit down for 20 minutes, man, I've got 4 texts and 3 missed calls and 50 emails. So it's just like a lesson in futility for me. So I've gotten to the point where I'm smart enough where I've delegated a lot of that stuff to our associate attorneys and other partners who are smarter than me. And I can just focus on those things that I need to handle.
Yeah, that's one of the hardest parts, but yeah, it's a challenge. I'm not sure it's ever can be completely solved. We're all working towards it. All right. So you got your Atlanta office, and then you got your Columbus and Savannah offices. So you got 3 offices. So you've gone through the experience of opening another office. Are you licensed in Utah? Have you ever thought about the Utah office?
I'm not yet, but I've thought about it. The PI market and kind of the law out there is similar to Georgia. So it's not Tennessee or Alabama. So it is viable, I think, if I wanted to do it. So I've considered it, like, because what if I know my neighbors and stuff. So what if one day they came to me and said, hey, I've got this family member, and I'd have to refer it to somebody else. So I guess depending on how much free time I have in the next couple of years, that'll determine if I want to take. I think they have reciprocity out there, so that would obviously affect my decision. I just haven't looked into it.
Yeah, reciprocity, that's a good thing. If you can do it, might as well just get it done, because you never know. You never know. You want to be ready.
Yeah, you could land a whale. A neighbor could walk up to me and go, hey, I've got a friend who has multiple traumatic fractures and it's a $10 million policy, and I'd rather keep that than send it to somebody else.
Just stay at the bottom of the mountain and have your card. But I guess they've got.
Yeah, I could do the Gwyneth Paltrow case. Yeah.
All right, man. I appreciate it. We've been going at this for a little while. Let's wrap it up here. But you've done a lot of different things. You've designed your life the way you want it. If I'm a younger attorney or just a law firm owner out there that is looking for some advice, what would you tell them if they're out there thinking about starting a firm or trying to grow their firm?
My biggest piece of advice would be figure out what you want your firm to look like. If you're a firm owner, how you want your firm to look, and then go and then figure out how you're going to get there. Don't just let it happen, because that's when you let the train run itself down the tracks, not good things happen, because you're not in control. And I think when you're purposeful about it, you say, this is where I am right now. This is where I want to be in 10 years. Here's how I'm going to get there. And here's how I'm going to execute it. For someone new in practice, I would say the same thing is, don't assume you have to do what everybody else is doing. You can be creative. And I think the best lawyers end up coming up with their own path to doing what they want to do, and invest in yourself. That's what I tell people when I speak at those college classes. I say that my biggest regret is that I didn't have enough courage to invest in myself for so long, because when I did it at 37, I wouldn't change anything, but I could have done it at 27, but I was afraid. I was scared of letting go of the easy coasting. And if I could do it over, I would have been more purposeful about that.
And I guess the last piece of advice is, if you're going to quit your firm, take 2 European vacations first.
Yeah. And I did get paid during that period. So I probably feel net positive for those trips.
Sweet. All right.
I wasn't making these.
Yeah, you're taking the time, man. So if anybody out there that wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way? I know you're on all sorts of social. Your Instagram's pretty good. Where should people find you?
My Facebook's my name, Arman Deganian. My last name is Deganian. My Instagram is Mountain Lion Man, which I love. I'm obsessed with cats and mountain lions. So it's MTLIONMAN. Those are the 2 I'm most active on. And my firm is Lintner Deganian, so you can always reach me through our socials or our website as well.
Awesome. Arman, it's been fun, man. Good to catch up.
All right, man. Good to see you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founding Partner Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can also connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn and check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned throughout our discussion by visiting www.lawfirmgc.com. We'll see you next time for more origin stories and insights from successful law firm founders.